So this is by Louise Klebs. It's in the Zeitschrift für Ägyptische Sprache for 1925, Der Ägyptische Seelenvogel. And she goes through and she shows the idea of the bird as a messenger is not dependent on which bird. There are kites, there are falcons. She even notes the Bennu bird. And the Bennu bird is the original, the Bennu bird, the heron, is the original inspiration for the Ba, the soul bird, the Ba of Osiris. And the Bennu bird is the famous phoenix bird. The phoenix is the one who comes to Heliopolis every 500 years, lights on the Ben stone, is either, in some legends, it's cremated and then it's resurrected every 500 years. And this phoenix is so important that the early Christian church fathers used it as a signal, as a sign, as a symbol for the resurrection of Christ. Christ as the phoenix. So this is a big deal. And there's many, many different, there's storks, there's geese, there's ducks, there's swallows, ibis. She goes through very many of them and shows that the auk bird, the famous auk bird, the various birds on page 105, 6, 7, and 8, she discusses the different forms that this soul bird can take, showing that it's not just a singular bird. See, this is the interesting thing about Egyptian symbolism. This is one of the ideas that the critics in 1912, when what's his nose? Oh, you know, Spalding, the Reverend Franklin Spalding, incidentally from Pocatello, Idaho, just 45 miles south of me. Kind of fun. He gathered together 8 of the world's most renowned Egyptologists. Nibley in his research found that they weren't all Egyptologists, but, you know, Spalding fudged somewhat, you know. He had to have that authority. And one of their arguments was that it couldn't be the bird couldn't be a messenger. That wasn't an Egyptian idea. Well, of course it was. Absolutely. In fact, another source that Nibley used that I happen to have, again, Eberhard Otto, this is in the ZDMG for 1952, the Spruch auf Altägyptischen Särgen. And he says that the form of the bird is the one that they wanted to take. Why? Because the bird could ascend, it was free, it could go from heaven to earth, come back and forth. It was its heavenly flight, the desire for movement, freedom. This is the principle. This is on page 197 of Eberhard Otto's. The dead wanted to take the form of the bird also. Same thing with the king uniting with the Horus hog. So there's another source right there. Further to the point, I also happen to have Rudolf Anthus' study, Zum Ursprung des Nefertem. This is in the ZAS, the Zeitschrift für Ägyptische Sprache for 1955, on page 88. He says, Adam and Ray were united together as Ray Adam. Verbunden is what he says. And he says, even as the king was united with Horus. Because here's the connection. The king was considered as the son of Re, the sun god. Yeah. But binding him with Horus is making him a son of the god, of the sun god, because Horus and Re, as Re Horakti, was also bound. And so there's the connection with the king, the divine human king, bringing divinity down in his person. This was later democratized. In the earliest times, it was only the king who was allowed to have the eternal life idea. And then later on, say after, I believe it's 1800 BC is what they say, more and more people wanted to get in on this. They say, hey, no, wait a minute. You betcha, we love you being the king, but we want some of this too. And they got it. It became democratized. The whole idea represented in the ancient Egyptian thinking is the divinization of a human being. Absolutely. Joining the gods. Yes, becoming one of them. The Ba's of the gods The Ba is the spirit. It's the vital element, the vital force, the Doppelganger, as the Germans would say, the double within man in our body. And this was represented by the bird. Well, there you have it. And still yet another source that I have, that Nibley used. Oh, this is a beauty too. J. Zandi in his Sarge text, Spruch 75. This is in the Zeitschrift für Ägyptische Sprache for 1972, page 60. He says, Der Tod wird mit einem Falken identifiziert. The dead was identified with the falcon, the Horus hawk. But of course. Now, remember, in our Facsimile 2, figure 7, it's Min, the god Min on that throne, who has that hawk tail. Absolutely. Min was also united with humankind. Through Horus, of course, through the human king. Became democratized later on. He says that point blank. He says, finally, in the end, schließlich, ist auch der Ba ein Seelenvogel. Finally, the Ba bird itself is the soul bird. And this is of the dead. He's speaking of the dead. The text is about the dead. So there's the connection. This is why it's so important to recognize in our figure the bird characteristic of both figures. The serpent with the bird head and Min as the hawk. And the connection with those is the grand keywords of the priesthood in the form of the wedge Jedi. Boy, that's a beautiful cluster of symbols. Very Egyptological. Joseph Smith called it the grand keywords of the priesthood. That's right. Of course. Oh, and another beautiful study. I've got to get this one in here. Oh, yeah, this is Lanny Bell. This is out of the Journal of Near Eastern Studies. Let's see, October 1985, number 4. This is the Luxor Temple and the Cult of the Royal Ka. His study is concerning what is the principal point about the Luxor Temple in ancient Egypt. And on page 288, he says the idea is the manifestation of the royal Ka. Now this is the king's Ka, and in the temple, he says on page 288, we know that the king, as a scion of the creator God, could be expressed in multiple Kas. Now see, this is interesting. Again, Egyptian symbolism. This is what the 1912 boys said. They said, it can't, this figure, Joseph Smith is wrong with identifying this figure as such and such, because it is someone else. But we know that one symbol could have multitudinous meanings. And on the other end of this, multitudinous different figures could all mean the same principle. For instance, the various types of birds as messenger birds. It didn't bother the Egyptians when they said, oh yeah, there's a kite. That symbolizes the messenger of heaven. They wouldn't have said, well, if the kite is the messenger of heaven, then the hawk can't be. No, it wasn't an either-or situation with the Egyptians. Not at all. It was a kite, a goose, a falcon, the Bennu bird, the heron, the ibis. All of them could function as the same function, even though they're different birds. The dove, I've got a very interesting source on that. I'll share with you in just a minute here. And he says, this each unique name of the king must express a special relationship between him and the god. And this is why in the cartouches, the ovals that the king's names are written in, man, there's the Golden Horus name, there's the main name, and there's another name. And, I mean, some of these cartouches can just be loaded with all kinds of names of the king, the cartouche itself, symbolizing the Shen ring, symbolizing eternity that the king has, joined in with the circular oval cartouche, represented the path of the sun god Re, from the cosmological point of view above, down through the underworld, and back around. Well, the king is right in the middle of that, eternity in the center spot, with all of his unifications with the Horus, with Re, with Osiris. He would be identified with Osiris when he was in the underworld. He would be identified with Re when he was up in the cosmos. Constant connection between the divine and the human here. This is the symbolism. This is the idea. In fact, I would dare argue, absolutely, that the entire hypocephalus, the round figure, Facsimile number 2 is basically the circle of eternity joining divinity with humanity. Of course. You see that in the split, with the lower half being the chthonic, the female aspect of the hypocephalus, and the upper half being the male aspect. Let me show you this. It's interesting.